Hi, I'm Bill Doherty, and I want to welcome the viewers to another edition of Bill's Bullpen. Bill's Bullpen is a program that's intended to give folks an idea of what's going on in our community, both here in Bourne and also in the Cape at large. And today I have with me, you're going to help me with this, James
Gouzias,
and he is the Veterans Employment Representative from Mass Hire of the Cape and Islands down at the Career Center, which I believe is, on North Street in Hyannis. And everybody knows where that is because it's next. I think it's the same street that the McDonald's is on.
Absolutely.
There
right.
you go.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Now, how do you like to be called, James or Jim?
Jim, I go by Jim.
Okay, well, Jim, and I also have with us Jim
Robinson.
Jim Robinson, and Jim, the two Jims, Jim squared, I guess, are going to talk a little bit about how they interact. Jim is an employee, and I want you to talk about what that's all about.
Sure.
And you're a volunteer.
I'm a volunteer.
Okay. And all of us are Army?
Army?
Army.
Okay. And I understand that there are a couple of other services. A little anecdote, when my father was in combat engineers in World War II, he always said that they had to go into the into the beachhead and set it up so the Marines would get their shots in, as they came across. But that's a story for another time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Jim, tell us a little bit about what you're all about.
Okay, Bill, thank you. So let's talk about my program. So the program I represent is called the JVSG grant, which essentially is Jobs for Veterans State Grant Program. Now that's a mouthful. Mm-hmm. Basically what that is it's a Department of Labor grant that is administered and run by the branch of the Department of Labor called VETS, Veteran Employment and Training Services. The mandate of the grant is to provide individualized intensive service, if you will, to veterans that may be experiencing significant barriers to employment, and we can talk about that in a little while. So the grant mandates that every career center across each state, and every state has X amount of career centers. For instance, Massachusetts has, I think, 29 career centers spread out across the state. Those career centers are one-stop shopping facilities for the general public, job seekers, to go to the facility, become a member, because you would have to become a member like you would for your local library, let's say, and to access the staff and the services and the resources of the career center. Everything's free, by the way.
Emphasis, everything's free?
Everything's free.
Okay,
yeah.
as opposed to an employment agency which might or might not charge you money.
Exactly, right. And I'd like to put this out as well, because sometimes it's a misnomer as far as the Career Center is not a placement agency, but it's an agency developed to help you develop your skills in order to become employed, and that runs a boatload of different types of activities, whether it's developing certain job skills such as learning how to write a resume, let's say, and we have workshops for that. Learning how to interview properly, learning how to write a cover letter, enhancing certain skills in order to make you most competitive in the job market, such as enhancing your computer skills. We run special classes for that. So there's different levels of training. The most basic would be workshops that are designed to be about 1 to 2 hours long at best, and general membership gives you access to those workshops. There's higher level training that might be available based upon a job seeker's assessment with an employment counselor to see if further training is necessary in order to help that individual attain their employment goals. And there's an eligibility criteria within that process. But those type of resources are available as well. Now, going back to what I do for veterans, every career center has at least one veteran employment representative assigned to them, an individual like myself. Our Department of Labor JVSG grant title actually is, we're called DVOPS, Disabled Veteran Outreach Program Specialist. And that specifically means we work with veterans that have significant barriers to employment, that need that special assistance in order to get over the hump. What does that look like? Vietnam era veterans across the board. We work with all Vietnam era veterans. We work with veterans that may be low income, veterans that may have a service connected disability rating with the VA, veterans that may have a history in the legal justice system, which may work as a challenge in finding employment due to the quarry issues. Veterans that may not have a high school diploma, veterans that may be homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. And there's a few other eligibility criteria as well. Now, keep in mind, every veteran that walks through the door in a career center is eligible for priority services, as well as their eligible spouses. There's an eligibility for spouses, and if they go through a checklist of questions and they're deemed to be eligible, then they receive priority services at the career center, as well as receiving services through me. I work strictly with veterans. I provide individualized services. It can be quick services in terms of one and done type activities, such as reviewing a resume, helping develop a resume that's focused to attaining the job goals of the individual. Or I can conduct comprehensive assessments and really help the individual explore different career paths and do full-blown career planning with that individual, which is pretty much case management and ongoing work in order to establish an employment goal, understand what it's going to take to attain that employment goal, help resource the activities and credentialing type resources.
In credentialing, identifying credentials. When I was on the workforce board, that was a continuing issue.
Sure.
And one of the problems on Cape Cod is that there's a lot of room in what I'd call a recreational and tourist industry, but there's not what I'd call enough income to develop what I used to call livable income levels.
Right.
Okay. Now, and I think on the credentials, what are some of the parallel, and I don't know if you're finished with with overall, but what are some of the parallel credentials that that you're able to identify and, let's say, get acceptability on the part of an employer that that somebody's gained in the military? Now, I have a great respect for what I was taught and what I learned when I was on active duty, and also in the reserves and the National Guard. But how do you get employers to, let's say, to recognize that value? How do you get them to understand, I guess I'm saying?
Okay, so that's a great question. So one of the greatest challenges service members face coming off of a military assignment or a military service, right, would be, how do you translate your skills from the military to the civilian sector in the most efficient way for an employer to understand what your capabilities are, right? I think most service members have faced that obstacle. In some situations, it's very difficult to translate soft skills being, leadership, your ability to cope in stressful environments, things to that nature. Hard skills are definitely easy to translate. Say you were a cybersecurity specialist in the military, you can translate some of those skills directly to the civilian sector and really be competitive with that. Some skills is a little bit more difficult. For instance, if you were a truck driver in the military, right? So how do you transfer your truck driving skills to the civilian sector when the civilian sector requires a CDL A or B license in order to get hired with an employer, although you were driving tractor trailers in the military for 6, 7, 8 years, whatever that might be.
I'm smiling because I had the ammunition platoon in the tank battalion.
Oh, yeah.
And I got everybody that was dumped from everybody else.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so I remember that. Now, okay, you're out there talking to people, right?
All the time.
Okay. Now, what kind of feedback are you getting based upon what Jim is saying here?
Well, it's funny. Jim used to work for me. All right, and we bumped into each other. We hadn't seen each other in the years of transitioning when I finally moved on the Cape, and we bumped into each other. And I said, I got to redo my resume. He said, well, this is what I do, so come visit me. So as Jim was just talking about, how do you interpret the skills? A lot of states have taken that skill, as Jim said, truck driver. I drove a 916 with a trailer and a bulldozer. That's equivalent to a CDL 1. The military has the documentation. You're supposed to be able to go to the registry, not all states, but they say they can interpret, because the military does the breakdown of the weight and the length, and then they say, well, I've got 8 years driving this in the military. You may have to take a driving test, but it translates with the information.
And by the way, I qualified for a CDL because I was I had a reserve company over at the Army base. Remember the Army base?
Yeah, right.
You know, because I was qualifying people on heavy equipment, as part of that responsibility, I just filled in the blanks, signed my name as the maintenance officer, and signed my name as a company commander, and they sent me back by return mail a CDL. And I kept that until they changed the insurance laws, so I had to pay more, pay more in order to keep it. And since I wasn't driving a truck, it didn't make much sense. But it did help me because I drove a school bus for a while on the basis of having this particular credential.
Back in the day, you're right. Back in the day, you just took your military driver's license, went over to the registry, and said, "This is my license."
Yep. They
didn't question it.
No.
But now, over the course of safety, we've done physicals, we do driving tests. If you hit a tractor trailer in your car, the tractor trailer driver has to go for a drug test. So they've really pushed the safety up, because a CDL, well, what it used to be, each state was individual. So a lot of the military skills have easily transferred. Now, when I went to the engineer school, Jimmy took
Belvoir?
No, I was actually one of the first classes at Fort Leonard Wood after they closed Belvoir's combat engineer school.
Because my father, who was back in World War II, he was sent to Fort Leonard Wood because that's where they had the fire, the fire training. Because what he did in civilian life, he was I would say, a fireman on a boiler. And the Army said, well, it says fireman, so they shipped him out to be
steam fireman.
That type of fireman. So anyway, when he discovered that, then he was shifted around. But the Army's, of course, has improved a lot in terms of identifying specific skill and skill levels, so that there is a skill transfer. Now, and as a practical matter, how many people that go through your program actually become truck drivers?
Well, it's a mixed bag. So what happens is, the process would be to conduct the career exploration. If an individual says, I do want to get my CDL A or B, and go down that career path, then we would sit down and say, okay, what do you have from the military that we can utilize to try to get you licensed? Because if there's a efficient, streamlined pathway to get that license, then we try to explore that route. I got to tell you, 95% of the time, that's not the case, and you have to go to a CDL training with a CDL school. So in terms of the Career Center, there's a process where you would apply for training, and if you're deemed eligible for training, then the Career Center, with utilizing WIOA, Workforce Opportunity Investment Act Title I funds, will pay for you to go to a CDL driving school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you establish the eligibility? What are the criteria?
There's different. Okay. For instance, and I'll just give you. There's different things that factor into that. First of all, there's a means testing if you're not specifically collecting unemployment. Okay. If you're collecting unemployment, you fall into a different bucket. Okay.
Because one of the problems with with collecting unemployment, and I ran into this on the workforce board, was you couldn't take training without giving up your unemployment compensation.
Well, there's so they have to look at it. If you're going to training, how can you legitimately be job searching concurrently?
Yeah.
And there's opportunity for you to file for a waiver for those job search activities while
Okay.
you're in training.
That's good to hear.
Okay, it's called the TOPS program.
Yeah.
And if you're approved for training and you're matriculated into a course, then you can go ahead and file for that waiver, push the paperwork through the school. They got to sign off that, yeah, you are a member of their class, their school, whatever. And then for the duration of the time that you're attending classes, you're not required to conduct job searches, but you are allowed to continue to collect unemployment.
Okay. Well,
So there's a mechanism
that's an
in place
important
for that.
piece,
Right.
you know, for veterans and everybody else. You know,
Sure,
to,
yeah.
you know, to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, and going back to, you know, identifying, okay, is becoming a truck driver the right path for you, right? And as a employment counselor, I help you explore that. I help you explore other options, and I help you find what really resonates. And through that process, we conduct what we call labor market information research to really explore what the labor market looks like, create some realistic expectations, then see if, okay, and I'm just going to come up with hypotheticals to make a point. I want to be a brain surgeon. Well, okay, are there jobs available here on the Cape for brain surgeons? Okay, what does
As a
it
matter
look
of fact, there are.
right. Okay, and do you have the academic capacity to complete brain surgeon training? Okay, and we explore all that.
Yeah.
We also explore what you bring to bear from the military and how we can translate that to civilian speak in order to help you articulate your skills and abilities to a civilian employer, and I help the veteran do that. It's similar to what I did with Jim, right?
So when you here you are in the real world, and you're going up with a guy, and veterans, if they're going into the tourist industry, are competing against I forget the name of the visa program.
J1.
J1, okay. They're competing against people that are coming in specifically for the J1 program. How do you get across to people that we have veterans that are looking for starter type employment?
Well, there's a lot of, okay, so Cape Cod, end of April, end of October is our tourist season. The J1s come in, they're vetted basically for about 3 months. And some of them get the extension. They're not only working at one job, but they're working a second job. But when we once a month we do Coffee with Joe.
Yeah.
And the guys come down, and I tell them this is the time to apply to get into this hospitality. A lot of hospitalities is nights and weekends. So you either have to give that up if you want that, but if you get your foot in the door and you survive the season, more than likely a lot of these places will keep you on 1 or 2 days a week. So it's getting in now or March and going, with, I always tell the guys or ladies, show up with a resume in your hand so they know who you are. And if Jimmy's done your resume, all right, it's already been interpreted from military to civilian. Do you have any leadership skills? And they say no. Well, you were a platoon sergeant. You were a leader of soldiers. So you do have leadership skills. So Jim is very articulate with the transitioning of, back in the day, 1-page resume, that was it. Now they're looking for 5 and 6 pages.
In the federal
system.
In the federal system.
I could
Most
never
veterans look for federal
there's
jobs.
a famous form. Is it Form 5? Whatever it is, you fill out for civil service.
Yeah.
I was so intimidated by that. I never filled out one of the forms for that thing.
Some of the guys come back and they want to go into federal service. So that's very articulated in a 4 to 5, 3-page resume. And the regular one is, there's no more, write your name and this, go on the computer to the website, and we'll let you know if there's an interview.
Yeah.
But there's, like there's shuttle drivers, there's pool workers, there's, restaurant, dishwashers. You know, a lot of guys say, or people say,
She said, you know all
I don't
those
want to be
things.
it. I don't. I get them too.
Okay, when I was at active duty, I got an extra duty of being a a consolidated mess officer. You know, what a fun thing that was. You know, set with the 7 days a week, 717 meals, 3 meals a day. You know, and all of that. Because when I was a kid, I worked in hotels. You know, in the kitchen.
Sure.
The first thing I did with the NCOs, I lined them all up and I said, show me your hands. And I said, what do you mean show me your hands? I said, I wanted to make sure I don't see any dirty fingernails.
Right. Yeah.
And it's funny because I mean I spent 10 years enlisted, so if my maintenance crew was out and I had one maintenance guy and he needed an extra hand, I'd roll my sleeves up and climb underneath. And you know, one day we were down here and because they call them contact teams. So they used to go to the units.
I know what those are.
And my guy was working on the truck, and he's like, "Hey, sir, can you give me a hand?" So I roll up my sleeves, climb under the truck. Next thing you know, somebody's kicking my foot, and I'm like, "I'll be out in a minute." And I come out, and it's the colonel, and it's like, "Whoops." He goes, "Lieutenant, that's not your job." But sir, he needed an extra hand.
I remember my colonel telling me, I know what's going on in all the other companies, but nobody talks to me from your company. And I'm saying to myself, you're goddamn right they don't talk to you. Because once you open your mouth, you're dead. But in any case, there was there's that thing about loyalty that what I'd say is a very important trait to have. And I'm hoping that when you're talking to people, you emphasize this, that that the promotion of loyalty in an employee is something that is born and bred in the military.
Right. So that's a great point. So
Right.
some of the skills that service members bring to bear, and going back to the term soft skills, we talk about leadership, camaraderie, teamwork, right? All these intangibles that they can bring to the workforce and kind of project out to the other employees in order to make the overall team and the work culture better. These are the great things that service members bring to the workforce. Dependability. And going back to loyalty, that's right. Statistically speaking, your most stable employees are former service members because they tend to be more loyal than a lot of other type of employees that may be there for the short term and then hit that next thing, whatever that next thing might be. Where service members tend to one for all for one, right? You see those characteristics and traits.
But they bring the discipline to
The
the
discipline,
job. The
that's
discipline
right.
to the job.
Yeah.
That what we were trained in the military. If you're 10 minutes early, you're late.
The worst chewing out I ever got in my whole life was being 1 minute at an IP late. And I heard about that for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
But like I'm saying, they bring the self-discipline where they have their routine in the morning. I mean, I watched a speech one time, and it was an admiral that was a SEAL, and he said, you want to start your day off, start by making your bed. Well, that's the military. We made the bed, hospital corners, shined our boots. We were standing in formation waiting to go to chow. I mean, so I get up in the morning at 4 o'clock. I got to be to work at 6. People are like, why don't you sleep till 5:30?
You got to read the paper.
Yeah,
I got to read the paper. I got to have my
Got to talk
coffee.
to the wife.
Right.
All that.
And another aspect that a veteran brings to the workforce is, stressful situations. Veterans tend to really maintain a calm demeanor under a stressful type of environment.
Let's build on that stressful type of environment, because there is a significant transition issue that comes from having been in a structured environment and then where everything is lined out for you. What happens when you're expected to exercise a lot of initiative? What happens then?
Well, we go through a thinking process. That was the military. That's the situation. We, as officers, we always had to give the colonel 3 courses of action, but that's how I think. That's the situation. We need to fix it. What are my choices? Or if something hasn't happened, we think ahead of time what could happen, but I can't fix it if it's not broken.
Well, I used to, as part of the extra duties that I had, I had to write contingency plans for division exercises, and that was always interesting because you go through the, and by the way, for those people who want to have an understanding of how you can do really wonderful business planning, is go through an operational template for writing an operations plan, because it has all of the
The
issues
operation
that,
orders, right?
MDMP, Military Decision Planning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's all of that all built into it, and anybody that has, I was always told I was a better staff officer than I was a commander, but on the other hand, they did take me out, before I left, because I was called a prick, but I was fair. I think we've all been through that.
I've been there.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get back to the transition part.
I'd like to comment on that. So part of what I do is help transitioning soldiers, Marines, airmen,
We have a couple Navy guys
sailors,
in there,
right?
too.
Yeah, right. So let's call them service members, but help transitioning service members discover who I don't want to say who they are. It's who they've always been, right?
What they're capable of doing.
What coming out of the military, you have this huge life change, and it's like, okay, so you are used to the routine, the structure, everything is planned out, and now you're thrown into an environment that, okay, nothing is clear anymore. You really got to compete, and it's in a sense a jungle environment. And how do you compete in an environment that you have to self-promote constantly? You have to understand that your abilities and capacity may not get you that dream job because you may not have that education, that background, that degree, that certification, because you were busy performing your duties and your mission in the military, and all the jobs that entailed may be equivalent to what you're looking for in the civilian sector, but the civilian sector looks for those certifications and degrees. Now, it's my job as your employment counselor to try to identify, all right, here's the career path that best resonates with you. How are you going to attain your employment goals within that career path? And we try to map out, okay, credentials, this is what we need to do. And that assistance kind of eases the fear, especially with younger service members coming into the civilian sector, as far as, okay, what's my life going to look like moving forward?
Now,
Right.
Believe it or not, we're almost at the end of this program.
Yeah.
So what is the takeaway that you would want to leave with people that are watching this?
The takeaway would be, you have, as a service member, a former service member, you have the capacity, skills, and ability to compete with anybody in the civilian sector.
Amen to that.
Do not sell yourself short. There's resources out there in the veteran community to assist you every step of the way, and I urge everyone to access those resources.
And I don't have my glasses on, but what's the phone number they can call?
They can call me at 617-780-0349. That's 617-780-0349. And they can, if I don't pick up right away, please leave a message, and I certainly will get back to you when we can set up an appointment to meet and move forward.
Jim,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming, and thank the viewers for finding out more about what your tax dollars at work to help veterans make an important transition back to where they were. We know a lot about making a soldier what he is. We don't know enough about getting him back to be reintegrated into civilian life, and this is all part of the services that our government is actually offering us that mean something. You're a volunteer? Okay. And they tell us not to do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very
That's a
much
good
for
cause.
coming.
Thank you for
And,
having us.
Thank you for having
and,
us.
This has been a production of Born TV.